Hi everyone, thank you all for being here today. My name is Olivia and I'm so happy to have with me here on this panel Pandu, one of the most prominent investors in Asia whose name honestly needs no introduction to this room. But yes, very excited and happy to be able to have an open and candid discussion about scaling digital infrastructure in Indonesia today. Okay. So Indonesia, at least from where I sit, is in a very, very interesting spot. It's attracting lots and lots of investments from big tech firms. Microsoft, for example, is investing $1.7 billion to build out AI and cloud computing infrastructure in the region. NVIDIA and Indonesia are planning to build out a $200 million AI center here. Demand has just been crazy for these racks and racks of powerful servers that feed our insatiable appetite for the internet. And more recently, thanks to the generative AI boom, the Metas and Microsofts of the world are increasingly relying on these powerful servers to build software to train patterns that recognize patterns from the flood of text, images, and videos on the internet. So Pandu, maybe to start us off and to set some context, what do you think is the competitive advantage Indonesia brings to the table here? Okay. Why are all the big tech firms here? What's in it for them?
Okay. First, thank you, Bloomberg, for doing this, and also Mr. Chairman, Yudi, thank you also for putting everyone together. It's been a big week in Indonesia this week. We hosted the Indonesia Africa Forum. Today, Pak Yudi's forum, Bloomberg's forum. And also later tomorrow is our Indonesian Sustainability Forum. And just happens to be, the Pope is here. So we're just in the middle of the week, and so glad the enthusiasm by everyone, especially regarding Indonesia. So answering your question, for the first minute, because I know it's right before lunch, I want to get you excited for lunch. The one thing that we all recognize today is that it is not an easy time. It's very much a transition year everywhere. Whenever you see about talking to somebody, their career, their lives, the country that they live in, it's a transition year, right? We will have an election in November in the US that everyone is thinking, and how does it mean for us, right? And I think geopolitics, for all of you that are decision makers, are probably top of mind. And this is a lot of changes happening in the world. And frankly, for investors, what you want to see is stability. And that's why when you ask why Indonesia and ASEAN in a bigger picture, we're one of the very few bright spots where there's very good political stability. Indonesia in particular, we've been blessed that we have a transition. It's an 8-month transition, UK is 1 day, here's 8 months. And the good thing is there is a good view of where things will go. The president-elect, I think we're 46 days left, right, before the new government that sets in. And quite a bit of the focus, if you see, the discussion has been focused on economic growth. Now, if you are CEOs, regional CEOs, global CEOs, your top of mind, number one, is do you have political stability? Number two, what is the upside for us investing? Because political stability is number one, then upside. And then lastly, what does the country want to do? And what I would say is that Indonesia today is one of the very few places in the world where you can have the two great forces, both China and the US, can invest and invest safely, right? And then number two, if you talk about economic growth, we have already always talked about the demographic dividends and the likes. The good thing is that most of them now are entering productive age. So the question by astute investors is that, what's next? The answer is, how can you increase productivity? Now, going back to your question, is also the question of the role of technology. In my personal view, AI will be more relevant and more significant than internet itself. I'm not going to go deeper on this one because I think the story is being written. The one thing that a country such as Indonesia can do is to invest in the infrastructure to support that development. And when you talk infrastructure, it's not necessarily just data center, but the human capital associated with it. So, big picture today, I would say, these are the growth stories for Indonesia. Political stability, I would say, is paramount. I can talk endlessly on the political situation outside, but Indonesia today, alhamdulillah, relatively good, and the focus of the president-elect and the team really was on consistent and sustainable economic growth. I think I'll stop there.
Very good perspective. I just want to delve a little bit deeper actually on 2 points you mentioned. I think political stability and the importance AI plays in the move forward. So let's expand a bit about Indonesia's plan for AI, right? You're part of Prabowo's transition team.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit more about the incoming administration's discussion about developing sovereign AI for Indonesia's national interests and security?
Okay, just to be clear, I was just in the campaign, and then I'll leave it to the team to do whatever it takes to focus on the next government. But the hope for investors such as myself is how can we build first the digital infrastructure, and that's related to data center, the easiest. The most important is actually two. Number one is to have access, and this is a bit technical, access to clean water, access to renewable energy. Thankfully, Indonesia has quite a bit. And then obviously, in terms of data sovereignty, and that's probably top of mind for a lot of the 5, 6 biggest off-takers in the world on this. When you talk about the development in AI, all the upstream actually is happening really in the US. And to be honest, China is making a very big push. So I'm so glad how the Chinese has evolved so fast in creating their own version of OpenAI. And that development in its own is fantastic to talk about. Indonesia will be a user of it. We just had a long discussion on AI a couple of days ago in Bali. For all of us, I think for all of you, to be very pragmatic about it, change is happening. The question is the rate of change in each of your businesses. If you are consumer facing, you'll see it faster. In the B2B, it's already happening. So it's how you evolve and willing to embrace change. I'm talking really big picture because we talk AI so much, but the question in top of your mind, is it really happening in my business? In our business, it's happening, especially on the cybersecurity front. Indonesians, fortunately, we don't really go to war. So our mindset is always a mindset of happiness. But the best cybersecurity talent is always in areas of conflict. And imagine, we just recently had 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago, a breakout, right, in one of our data center, the national data center. It's because we don't live in constant state of paranoia. We didn't know what to do. Actually, if you test it, Pak Yudi, this is like true, right? In a lot of the government places, if you try to hack, most likely you can. And this is a problem because now the business of hacking has become a professional business. I'm sure there are unicorns out there that are simply doing this as a business, and it's like an organization. I'm trying to get smart on it. Thankfully, I've invested a little bit on this, but all of it is really in conflict areas, the best talent. So all I'm saying, why is it relevant for you? All of you are CEOs or decision makers. This thing will happen very fast, very swiftly. What is happening with AI is actually how do you create cybersecurity to go, in terms of fighting your own AI. That's also something that is being developed today. And if you are not open-minded and willing to embrace and take risks on this, our business, especially on the B2C side, will feel very significant effect, okay? And I don't know how much deeper I can go into this, but please keep an open mind on this, okay?
So cybersecurity and AI, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to talk a little bit about, how the crucial part of AI boom kind of centers also on the buildings needed to sustain our digital workings of modern life, right? The vast amount of resources required also makes expanding a little bit more complicated. from some of the conversations I've had, a lot of issues, two main issues come up. One is power, the other is supply chain.
Yes.
How is Indonesia navigating this, or as an investor, how are you looking at this picture and sussing it out?
Yeah, I've been going around the last couple of months, traveling around the world and trying to attract FDI. And one of the things is that, Pandu, everybody's looking for another place to essentially de-risk their supply chain. What can Indonesia do? Frankly speaking, our neighboring country, Malaysia, has done a very good job. It's simply because there's no transition. In a transition, usually people say, hey, most of their things like, what am I gonna do next after this? So Malaysia's taken a little bit of leap, especially in data center. They signed up close to over 3 gigawatt of data center, while Indonesia today, with everything signed, maybe 1.5 gigawatt. So imagine a country that is 1/10 the population or 1/15 of the population of Asia, but 2 times the data center need. And I asked, what is the usage for? Some of it is actually for Indonesia. So question, what are we doing here? So this is going to be the challenge, but also the opportunity. There is a big boom happening in data center, and I think it's here to stay. Last night, I'm sure some of you saw the announcement of Blackstone buying AirTrunk, and that gives you the valuation perspective of, and this is already an established company, right? Imagine for Greenfield, the businesses. And I think this will have a significant effect. The second one, I think that people haven't talked about, and I think you will talk about the next 6 months, is in the business of semiconductor. What is happening in Taiwan, you have to watch very carefully. There is going to be a significant move in terms of not just capital formation, but also value chain moving. They have to de-risk. And this is happening today. The question is, will it be Vietnam? Will it be Malaysia? Or will it be Indonesia? That's our job to essentially say, please, Indonesia, not bad, The good thing is we sell the most handphone. From an off-taker perspective, the most handphone is in Indonesia. In terms of the usage, the end product for semicon, actually it's all in Indonesia. But we have to develop, right? Because there's a lot of upstream going to downstream. Upstream is the hardest, most of the R&D is there. How can we lock it and move up that value chain? But again, this is a fight for both capital, or a fight for value chain. And I'm being very open. These are the 3 countries that are fighting for quote unquote talent and capital.
Yeah, talent and capital is so important, right? And like what you mentioned, Indonesia is a hugely populous country. I think the 4th most populous country in the world. And when you talk about Southeast Asia, like Malaysia and Singapore, who are also attracting lots of investment, what role does Indonesia play in the greater ASEAN region in that aspect?
It's a very good question. This was actually a discussion I had this morning with our Malaysian counterparts. We as ASEAN actually very shy, a bit malu a bit. Sometimes, when we talk something, we said, it's okay lah. You go ahead, a bit of that. Actually now, especially after we hosted the G20 a couple of years ago, right? And then the ASEAN summit after that, we, along with our ASEAN counterparts, agree not just to work closer together, but for Indonesia to take a lead. Given the scale and the size of the economy, how can we integrate closer? Number 1 is obviously how can we create an ASEAN company? And this is important. Why? Because of the capital, the human capital movement. How do you make it very easy for people that works in an ASEAN company, meaning a company that has an establishment over 2 ASEAN countries, can easily get job permits, etc. And then obviously number 2, the medium term, will be a discussion about how do you create a value chain in terms of the grid, power grid. Right? And this is all across some of the ASEAN countries. The long term, and I have to leave it to Pak Yudi and the team, etc., is of course in terms of monies, currencies. But that's a bit longer term, and that obviously require quite a bit of political push, I would say. So most important from the business sector, it'll be business-led. How can we create easier, closer business together by investing in each other? Easier. That's the easiest and closest thing we can do. Coupled with our ASEAN countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, I think has become very good. Political level, relationship is excellent. Business level too. If you guys notice, the last 24 months, there's been a lot of activities happening between these three countries. Followed later, most likely, with Vietnam, and then Thailand, and then Philippines. And Philippines is also extremely important when you talk about geopolitics, what's happening between the US and China. So ASEAN, I think you will see an ASEAN that is becoming more active, a lot of intra-ASEAN trade, and there's a lot of capital too that is moving in to ASEAN. I know this discussion has become more geopolitical discussion, but to be honest, that's my top of mind today is really this, because it will affect how we do things the next 5 years. Now, lastly, I thought also, because for some of you maybe are visitors, first time to Jakarta, first time to Indonesia, and probably you ask, what's the KPI for the government the next 5 years? What I am lobbying, right, is the KPI should be the ease of doing business. That's it. If we are a G20 countries wanting to become a G7 countries, then it should commensurate. Our ease of doing business should be in that level. Full stop. That's a target. After that, you can talk the derivatives of all this.
Very well said. I think very exciting time for Indonesia and ASEAN as a whole. Lots of interest and all that. I'm sure you also agree, like, clean energy is also a big part of the equation. Indonesia will need to invest heavily into renewables to power these data centers in a sustainable way. What impact do you think the additional demand from data centers will have on this kind of transition period then?
Well, massive. I think the shortage, this is new demand. There's two big new demand that's happening in Indonesia today. Is the growth of data center and also the electrification in terms of EV. I think EV, because it started from such a small base, it's grown 100% among four-wheeler and two-wheeler, and I think will also still double until next year. I think all of you will wake up to the world of EV probably by end of 2025, and it'll be so topical because then you see every car, maybe every 5 cars, every 6 cars, like, hey, that's an EV, right? And it's happening today also because of what's happening in China. There's about 139 brands of EV cars that essentially will have to consolidate, and everything is being pushed down to Europe and also to ASEAN. Now we have to learn also how do we manage this carefully, because in Thailand it has created a social issue with respect to EV, right? So I would say these will create new demand for renewable energy. Java, which is supposed to be over electrified, right? There's an over supply. Now there's a discussion that we are under supply in the next 2-3 years. And the reason is also has to do with Jakarta having a problem with the air quality, pollution. So now there's already discussion of shutting down a couple of the coal power plants surrounding area. I have to touch on this because we're also having a regional, election. Jakarta is one of them, and Jakarta is not a small city, right? 20 million people, 20,000, 25,000 GDP per capita, so about $500 billion economy is in Jakarta. It's almost like an ASEAN country in Jakarta. So there's an election, and we did a polling. What's so interesting is top 2 issues. Number 1 is employment or unemployment, and the second issue is actually related to life quality and population and pollution. So now whoever is going to be in power, and there's 3 people running, right? This is one idea they have to address immediately. So this will also affect the power shift and fastening the power shift, especially in a place like Jakarta, from a coal-related to non-coal related. I'm not saying coal is going to disappear tomorrow. All I'm saying now, it has become a political agenda in the big cities, especially here in Java.
Definitely top of mind for the new team, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, you poll and this is top 2 issues.
What do you think are some good efforts now and in the short term to source these additional clean energy for the transition?
Most important is having an intra-provincial grid, because a lot of the sources of renewable is not in Java. It's outside of Java. So the most important is investment into grid, national grid, smart grid. And that will be significant. I think it'll be at least $15 to $20 billion that needs to be invested. So those that are thinking of investing logistic and grid, I think there's going to be significant opportunity there because you need the grid to connect and have the connectivity. And Java will still be about 65-70% of the entire population. They're becoming richer, more productive, higher GDP per capita. All of them want this. The issue of air quality, the issue of energy transition is now top of mind for a lot of the first-time voter, young people, and it's no longer something different, something changed. So this is already, to an everyday person, it's become a topical issue.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and all of this kind of ties together, right? The geopolitics, the quality of life, and all these investments into Indonesia. Very exciting time, actually. I just want to kind of wrap us up with a bit more forward-looking and zooming out to a more global question. The AI race is here. What role does Indonesia play in this global AI race you see? And what is what you hope to be the end goal?
Well, the end goal for us, Indonesia, as a country, we can grow. Our citizens can become more productive and see Indonesia really as a place of stability, right? I mean, I think that's the end goal of every leaders in the country is how do you make sure that each of the population can grow. And there's two things, obviously, that is a focus of President-elect Prabowo is obviously one, elevating people. This is an issue in terms of poverty. How do you move from low income? There's about 30 to 40 million of Indonesians today, of our brothers and sisters, that are still living in that line, and how do you increase that, right? It's big picture, right? And obviously we need to have the economic growth to sustain it, and obviously the two challenge that he's focusing, and it's infrastructure in terms of healthcare and education. When you talk infrastructure, you talk about 20 years. How do we do that? Have enough food, have enough nutrition. So obviously the quality food program will be one of them. And the education becomes very important. And number two is in terms of agriculture. We don't touch it here, but that's also an infrastructure play because Indonesia is so big, right? How do you develop the productivity in the agriculture space? How can AI help? AI will help obviously in terms of education and healthcare, significant. So let's use the good of it. Let's make sure the good of it, and to support it, the easiest is to build the digital infra related to it, right? And we have the clean water. We also have the access to renewable energy. So we need to have a very focused effort thinking how do you create the best digital infrastructure for our people, because the offtake is there. And if you're a businessman investing in this business, you know, hey, these people are growing wealthier over time. You know, the next 10 years, 15 years, you can read it. These people are growing wealthier, becoming more sophisticated. The internet and AI will actually lower the cost of knowledge, will lower the cost, hopefully, of healthcare services. So there's going to be significant business opportunity. And underlying all that, most important, is that you have social stability and political stability. And social, I cannot underline enough. You cannot have a place where one state is so wealthy and the other not so wealthy. That will create a strong social tension. So social stability is extremely important, and then political stability equivalently very important. So what I'm so glad about, all of our political leaders, the national leaders, are very cognizant of it and very aware. And the idea of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which is our motto, is being held forward by our leaders, and that's why I've been going around the world for the last 6 months trying to figure out, hey, what's going on in the US? Hey, what's going on in the Middle East? What's going on in North Asia? I went to China 3 times in that span, and I realized, hey, Indonesia not so bad, Sometimes you are our biggest critic to our own country. But imagine if we just unite, and I'm so glad the president-elect really just focusing now on policies. I think we're gonna have a much better start. When you remember 2013, 14, Pak Yudi, when we are there helping, different because at the time, we don't even know where things are going. Now it's a very clear lead where the country is going, and hopefully the next 6 months we can prove to all of you this is going not just in the right way, but at the right momentum and the right execution. So that's why I'm super excited.
I'm excited as well. Amazing. Thank you so much for all your thoughts and for giving something to chew for us, giving something for us to chew on. Thank you, Pak Pandu.
Thank you.
Okay.